So I'm Mary Beth Norton. I'm the chair of the Podell Awards Committee of the Executive Council of CAPE. And we are pleased this morning to welcome you all to the very first presentation of the reports from people who have recently completed or are nearly complete with their awards under the Podell Endowment. I want to say a little bit about the Podell Endowment. We have never done this before, but this is the first of what we plan annually to have people who have received these grants to give reports about their work. This project was generously endowed by the Cornell alum Albert Podell, class of '58. The goal of these awards is to support research, scholarship, and outreach that can make the world a better place. Applications can be submitted by any member of CAPE. CAPE members may apply for support for work in collaboration with colleagues who are not retired, so you don't have to stick with other retirees to get an award. But there is a 3-time award limit per person, so you can have no more than 3 awards as an individual. The peers projects must focus on work that will be useful to the world. The potential for widespread dissemination is also desirable. Projects can serve as a capstone for an applicant's academic career or can support new research in retirement. And I think you will see from the 4 presentations we're getting this morning how varied and interesting these projects are that the Podell Endowment is supporting. So I want to encourage people to think about applying in the future for such grants. And we're going to begin with Michael Hoffman to talk about his research on telling the climate change story using the ultimate messenger, food. So I'll turn it over to Michael Hoffman.
How many of you eat? Here. Good morning. So we're worried about climate change, huh? So am I. How do I advance this? But the arrow? The right arrow. Yeah. Thank you. There you go. All right. Look at those strawberries. No, they're not from my garden. But I keep track of the climate change news. And yes, I lose sleep. The last 3 years have been the warmest years on record since 1850. Believe it or not, the cold we're experiencing is part of climate change. The Arctic is warming very fast, much faster than the rest of the planet. And it's messing with the cold air up there, and now it swoops down on us. So it's the extremes. But the point of this conversation this morning is, how do we tell this story to get people's attention? So I'm convinced that, and you can argue against, that food has a role. Why food? Well, we already said it. We all eat. So something about when you tell the climate change story, it has to be relevant, and it's pretty hard to beat food. It's part of our cultures, family histories. It's emotional. Not that long ago, my partner of 54 years, an extraordinary cook, and we're having dinner. I looked across the table and it says, "Don't ever leave me." It's enjoyable, easy to talk about, and it gives us unlimited stories because it's all changing. The story is meant for the rich world, the US in particular. In cumulative sense, we've caused most of the damage to the climate. And George Bernard Shaw says, well, there is no love sincere than the love of food. What does food mean to you? A lot of people say community, family, friends, sustenance. It's pretty important. So I've taken a different approach, and I've been given the okay on this. Carrie Kaplinka and myself, over the last several years, received 5 awards. So I'm going to talk about the aggregate the story about all of those. First, it helped provide support to write a book. And I'll tell you how to get that later. We also developed a website based on the book. We have databases in our website about how food is changing, many different ingredients. We did a social media campaign to get the word out about this story, and more funding for the food database. The book starts out, introduction, where does our food come from? A lot of people don't appreciate that, but it comes from everywhere around the world. And what does that mean? The climate is changing everywhere around the world. It has an impact. What is climate change? How does it affect our menu? And then, like a menu, before dinner, drinks, salads, main course, grains, starches, others, etc., and desserts and coffee. What's happening to each? And what's being done to keep them on the table? And finally, there are tens of thousands of people out there fighting this fight. Farmers, businesses, scientists, they're all helping. And what can we do? For the book, we had the pleasure of hiring an undergrad art student at Cornell. And these are some of her drawings that are in the book, but I want to draw your attention to the one in the middle. I gave her a bar chart. 62% of people enjoy coffee because of, I like the taste. Look what she did. There's a person with a cup, 62%, and so on and so forth. That's, to me, is just the creative mind of an artist and how to tell this story. The website, developed by Cornell undergrads, and it has several different components. Again, it's kind of like the book, what the basics of climate change, where does it come from, what's happening to the menu, but it gives us in a much more visual context, obviously using a website. And by the way, over the years, undergrads have continued to maintain the website. This is, where does food come from? I already made this point, but it comes from everywhere. And climate change is changing things everywhere, which is affecting our food. I think the strawberries in my, are we okay now? The strawberries in my refrigerator are from Florida. The blueberries from Peru. If you want blueberries this time of the year, unless they're frozen and thick last summer, they're most likely to come from Peru. This is the section in the website on what's happening to our climate. The air is changing. Greenhouse gases are capturing more heat and holding it. Talks about that in very simple language for everyone to understand. Anybody concerned about the future of chocolate? Coffee probably is more important, but chocolate. Well, here's the story of chocolate. Most come from Western Africa, where drought and precipitation changes are affecting production dramatically. Another story to tell. And that's the point of all of this. This is not intended to be a doom and gloom story. It is meant to be a solution and a way to talk about this topic. On the left, may not be too easy to see, but basically these are the things we can do. And one of the most important things we can actually do is talk about climate change. How can you use food to talk about it? It makes it really easy. On the right, what are scientists doing? One of the most important things is developing resilient varieties, more tolerant of high temperatures, drought, and so on, to keep our food on the table. There's even a section of quizzes that one can go to on the website. Test your knowledge about wine, about salad oils, a variety of things. I've taken this several times and I got a B+. And then right there's a book about storytelling. It's a cookbook. Storytelling is how we share messages, how we pass our history from generation to generation. But instead of just the standard storytelling book, this is a cookbook and how to use food to tell stories. I do this with students, and I've never laughed so hard. Because sometimes we play roles. Climate change denier, climate change believer. Did that one time, and the believer looked across at the other student and said, "It's like talking to a wall," to the denier. The denier said, "I could say anything." And it really scared me. So having that sort of conversation is a starting point. And the database, yes, people eat alligator. That's the top one there. It's actually uncommon in the South. But here it talks, you click on any one of those and it tells a story of what's happening to tea. Changes in temperature and changes when the rain falls is affecting the flavors tea. Another story to tell. We also did the social media campaign using Instagram. Bear with me, I'm not a social media expert. I was impressed with what the students did, the 2 graduate students. But they shared all these stories and increased our number of viewers substantially. It's not up there in the tens of millions, obviously, but we got the message out by social media. And on the right, we used Twitter as well. They sent out messages a couple times a week. Now I'm going to shift gears. So where has this taken us? It's taken us what I call the Our Changing Menu Initiative. Since the funding was first made available, I've given 70 presentations on this topic to all kinds of audiences. I'm waiting to hear back from the Chautauqua Institute. I've been nominated to speak there this summer to an audience of 4,000 people. My point, people are interested in this story. Done opinion pieces, booze from Thanksgiving, how that's changing. The hamburger, by the way, oh, you have to pass the hamburger around. Oh no. Around is coming the hamburger. And 2 bottles of booze. But I'm going to open up the questions later on. Okay, what's going on with the hamburger? What's going on with scotch? What's going on with gin? There's a lot of stories to tell. And a lot of interviews too have come forth because of this funding to get us started. You don't need to be a scientist to tell this story. Coffee's changing, the hamburger. This is the ultimate Bloody Mary. But the point is, everything in that Bloody Mary is changing. There's a story to tell. By the way, I ate this Bloody Mary and drank it, and then I took a nap. Does anyone care? We did a national survey to see if people are concerned about climate change impacts on food, and yes, they are, regardless of political affiliation. And 90% of the Democrats, as well as over 62% of the Republicans, wanted to know more. What's going on with our food because of climate change? We asked how many people talk about climate change, food, 3/4 talk about climate change. Not as many. Can we bring those conversations together? I teach a course. Here's some quotes. I'll just read one. But they discovered the power of food. The might of food lies in its subtlety, a silent force with profound cultural and personal nuances, making topics like climate change more palatable and comprehensive to diverse audiences. The students also went from more or less hopeless to hopeful when they realized food had this unique capacity to help people understand what's going on. Another part of this is a potential project in a big dining hall at Cornell, where we will tell this story. And keep in mind, the dining halls this one brings in about 8,000 students a day. That's a lot more than can take a climate change course, and they come from all the majors. We're also going to have climate cafes where they can just talk about how they're feeling, as well as some food exhibits to describe what's going on. And we can't give up. Can you imagine a world without ice cream? There would be darkness and chaos. Thank you very much.
Well, I thought I was well organized, but obviously I forgot to introduce Professor Hoffman adequately. So let me give you the introduction now that you've already heard from him. He came to Cornell in 1990. He was in the entomology department, but then moved into leadership in CALS for 80% of his time. And he only visited his lab on Friday mornings. His title at the time of his retirement was executive director and professor. And so you already know about his projects. He's been involved in different ones, and he was talking about all of them. Now I want to do the proper introduction for the next presenter, and that is, let me get my papers organized here. That is Susan Ashdown. She came to Cornell in 1990 and was the costume shop manager for theater Cornell for 8 years. She went away somewhere and she didn't say where, but she then came back in 1991, and she has been in textiles and apparel in the College of Human Ecology. She retired as Helen Conoyer Professor. And the Podell project that she is introducing tonight was directly related to her work experiences, because after teaching pattern making for apparel for 40 years, she saw how both the students and the apparel industry had changed, but textbooks had not. She could have written one of her own textbooks, but she finds it much more satisfactory and effective to work on developing new editions for books that already have an established market. And so her project that she'll be talking about this morning is improving textbooks for technical apparel designers' education to support sustainable clothing design. So Susan Ashdown.
Okay, Mike, I'm going to take a page from your book. How many of you wear clothes? And how many are concerned about climate change? Excuse me. Obvious, I need a cup of coffee here. Oops. There we go. Okay. The apparel textbooks today are not appropriate for students entering the industry. And that's what I am focusing on in my retirement as something to keep me active and busy. That's all I was doing for a while through pandemic, but I realized I was missing students. So now I have a position at Ontario College of Art and Design in Toronto, where I get to interact with students every day, but I don't have to teach a class or grade projects. So this grant was fantastic. It really helped us a lot in our work. So the apparel textile books, textbooks today are absolutely not appropriate. They teach process, not concept. And all the examples in the books and all the dress forms in all the studios in all the world demonstrate one body type. The body type is tall, slender, and an hourglass shape. Industry fit models, on which all of our clothing are based, are 3 to 5 inches taller and 3 to 4 sizes smaller than the average woman. The reasons for this mismatch, this is mislabeled, I'm getting into sustainability, but the reasons for this mismatch, they're driven by industry, by history, by traditions, and economics. And if you're interested in a really good book, easy read and fascinating, Lauren Downing-Peters, a historian, has done this incredible book that explains why we are why we have been saddled with this ready-to-wear clothing model that does not work. And she traces it back through the history and the economics. Bodies are narrowly represented due to the constraints of mass production. And the body type that we teach our students by is we are told, oh, this is the one that your clothes will look wonderful on, right? That's why we teach them that. Absolutely untrue. This body type as an aesthetic preference is learned, not inherent. There's nothing inherent about that tall, slender body that is a better representation for clothing. And this book, which has just come out, really shows us that in a way that I find absolutely wonderful. It shows how proper fit, proportion, and respect for larger bodies create amazing, beautiful results. And it also describes the failed attempts by the apparel industry to provide plus-size options and the reasons for these failures. And they have very little to do with aesthetics, much more to do with economics. So new business models and strategies are needed. We need to teach students how and why this is necessary and why this is important. Now we're on sustainability. What happens is many people cannot find good fit in ready-to-wear. Garments are purchased but are not loved. The few that fit and function well are worn. Everything else migrates to the back of the closet and eventually to the landfill. How many of you have a closet where everything you wear is, everything in the closet is represented? You wear it. No. How many wear 50% of what's in your closet? I got a few good ones there. How many of you wear 10% of what's in your closet? Be honest. Yeah. So the cycle continues. New unsatisfactory or marginally satisfactory garments are purchased. So the answer is, well, let's carry on a little bit. So most discarded clothing goes to the landfill. You can see the large number that are just landfilled. This was in 2018, before fast fashion, so it's hugely different and worse now. The tiny bit that are recycled. And I know you're thinking, I donate to Goodwill or the Salvation Army or that little pop-up in the grocery store parking lot. That's where you put your clothes that you no longer want. But when we virtuously donate our clothing, instead of throwing it away, 70% of it is sent overseas, where it destroys local clothing economies and where about 40% of it ends up in their landfill. One of my colleagues, Lucy Dunn, says that as an industry, we are making trash. And I believe her, we are making trash. So how do we change this? Well, we start with the way we teach new students coming into the industry. So these are the books I learned from in the 1950s and 60s. The fashions are different. The drawings were less refined back then, and the books contain more text and fewer visuals. But basically, modern apparel textbooks teach pattern making and construction in exactly the same way as these books. This is a teaching method that's governed by rules and is generally how-to instruction. They were developed to teach housewives how to provide clothing for their families back when it was cheaper to make than to buy. So that's very good reason to make it a how-to book. Excuse me. We need to teach our students not rules, but processes. We need to focus on why, not how. So students have an understanding and tools to create good fit for every body type. And more importantly, to understanding that we need to shape a new, more sustainable apparel industry. Gonna be tough, as in all the areas in which we overconsume and manufacture the easiest, cheapest way. But it's possible, particularly if we know what we're doing and know the goal. So my Podell project is, as I said, as I wrote in my introduction, I could write a book, of course, but it takes so long for a book to get traction and to actually make a difference in the world. But there are some amazing books out there that are very well established. And so I've decided that editing those books was the way to go. By the way, this is my second Podell grant, my second textbook. So this one is a very popular entry-level pattern making book, first published in 1987. And Nora MacDonald, the author, and I are working on a 5th edition. Nora had said that she didn't want to do another edition. She was retired as well. But when I called her up, my publishing company, based on my other book, said, will you do this book now? We love what you've done with the first one. And I said, I need to talk to Nora. And I called her and talked to her, and she said, yes, if we can work together, I will do another edition, which I'm absolutely ecstatic about. Nora already included more process instruction than most pattern making books, but we're introducing even more, and also introducing variety in body types and instruction on how to pattern for different body types. So let's see, where am I? Okay, yeah. So the Podell grant contributed in a major way to our editing of this image-heavy classic book. We were able to hire a graphic artist, and she creates our new images in a vector format. The legacy illustration, of course, books like this are packed with illustrations, like 10 on a page, well, 2 to 8 on a page. And so there are thousands and thousands of illustrations demonstrating how the pattern is manipulated to create different shapes. And all of them were done by Nora and her colleagues by hand, inked, and then photographed. So they're all raster images. Raster images have a lot of disadvantages. You can't do a lot with the raster image. You can't alter it. You can't modify it. You can't change it. When we hired a graphic artist, she created our new images in a vector format. So that's a format which gives very clear illustrations no matter what scale it is, and they can be modified easily. Really important. So here's an example of the pattern shapes that we developed for different body types against the dotted line, which is the standard pattern system. And many students go through their career or through their education never seeing these differences. They just work with one shape. So that's a good start. So I asked our artist what she feels she contributes, and her answer was clarity, accessibility, and quality. And I believe that. So this is one of the new designs. This is a jacket pattern. It allowed us to introduce the concept of patterning for an outer layer worn over clothing. Again, something that it's a concept that is not talked about in most pattern making books. These are the photos that she worked from. Okay, so this is what I gave her, and this is what came out of it. We both started with a basic pattern shape that was the same. I had the actual physical one, and she had the digital one, so she could duplicate what I did, but digitally on the screen and in the book. We were also able to, the grant also funded modification of the hundreds of images in the book to include metric measurements. So anywhere there was, can I point? No, okay. If you look at each of those measurements, the 1/8 inch dash 3/8 inch there, and draw right below it, it says 0.3 centimeters to 1 centimeter. She added all of those to all of the images in the book, which opens this up to international students. The problem with the system we use is that no one else in the world uses it. Okay, so, but unfortunately, most of the books are published in this country and they use it. So every book I've done, I've made sure that every measurement in the book is, and metric measurement is given along with it, both in the text and in the images. Huge task, but I feel really important. So this work has, the Podell grant contributed greatly to our efforts to create the kind of textbook needed for our students entering the industry, but also the Podell magic. Our publisher, Fairchild, at Bloomsbury Publications, recognizes the value of vector illustrations. And they've now hired our Ithaca artist, who's Audra Linser. If any of you know her, that name, she's a mural artist in Ithaca. So some of the murals you see, she's done. And they hired her to convert more than 1,500 legacy illustrations in the book to vector. Huge task, huge task. But what this does, it brings revenue from an international company to a local artist, expanding the impact of the grant beyond its original intent. So, thank you.
I realize I also should have said, I'm doing a very bad job as an introducer, that we will have a joint Q&A with all the presenters at the end. So you'll get a chance to ask questions of everyone. So our next presenter this morning is Barbara Lust, who came to Cornell in 1976, retired in 2017 from the Human Development department with an emphasis on psychology and cognitive science. She is now currently a research affiliate at MIT in linguistics and philosophy. And her current project, which has to do with the Podell Award, it involves the question of how language is lost, which complements the lifelong interest in how language is acquired. So, Barbara Lust.
So Jeff, how does this work?
Right here.
Oh, I see. Okay, works. Okay. Thank you, Mary Beth. We work in an area of cognitive science. It's an interdisciplinary. Cognitive science is an interdisciplinary area, study of the mind. We focus in particular on the study of language. Language is a complex system. Words combined to phrases, combined to sentences, sentences combined with other sentences. And the end result is that the human species can produce or understand an infinite possibility for expressing meaning, thoughts, desires, fears, etc. This means that every sentence that we produce or comprehend really reflects an integration of this complex system by which sentences are created and this infinite possibility for meaning. Now, we have most of our life, or a large part of it, been fascinated by the question of how language is acquired. So that is because of all the 6,000 or 7,000 languages in the world, children everywhere in the first few months and years of life will acquire that language or more than one language and do it without teaching. In fact, we have a book just about to come out that's with Suzanne Flynn at MIT and Claire Foley at Boston College, studying a set of children across the world, looking at how they acquire complex sentences. But now we, in the last 10 years or so, and here is where the Podell Fund has been critical to us, we've been able to begin a program of investigation of the complementary question, how is language lost? And we are looking at that question in terms of how is language lost in Alzheimer's disease. We all know that Alzheimer's disease is a progressive neurodegenerative disease, affects millions of people across the world, is associated with aging, but is not necessary to aging. We also know now that the development of Alzheimer's in an individual is actually a long process. There is a long prodromal period. Researchers think now that it's 2 decades, 20 years, where the disease is developing kind of silently in individuals before it is diagnosed, before the symptoms are there for the diagnosis. We are focusing on this period with the idea that if the disease can be identified early, there may be more ways to find ways to halt its progression. We're focusing, in fact, on a condition called MCI. Some of you may know it's mild cognitive impairment. You see it on this chart. It's looked at as a transitional phase with a high probability of transition to Alzheimer's disease, but not a necessary one. It's very complex. There's several forms of it, very difficult to diagnose. And most cases go undiagnosed. So we focused our research on the MCI period. And our question has been, can we discover changes in language that are happening during this prodromal period? Changes that wouldn't have been noticed before. Now, there had been studies that suggested there were changes in language, but they often focused on words. So, for example, some of you may know that the press conferences of Presidents Reagan and Bush were compared. Reagan going on to develop Alzheimer's a few years after his presidency. And the argument of the researchers was, when they studied those transcripts, you could see a change in vocabulary, specifically vocabulary range was kind of restricted or shrunken in the Reagan transcripts. But we wanted to ask a question that went beyond words. We wanted to say, is there a change in the cognitive system by which sentences are created? That was our leading question. To do this, we set up a team, an interdisciplinary team. So a neuropsychologist from MGH, Janet Cohen-Sherman, linguist from MIT, Suzanne Flynn, linguist from Cornell, James Gare, statistician from Cornell, and now a computer scientist, Sham Kapoor, who has a AI, is developing an AI technology company in California. We studied 3 groups. We studied a group that had been diagnosed as MCI at Mass General Hospital. We compared that to a group of healthy aging matched in age and education. And we compared that to a group of healthy young, those of you 20 years old. Now, we developed a protocol, so we interviewed each one of these individuals in several ways. But what I wanted to do is give you an example of a couple of the primary methods we use for eliciting language and evaluating it. And both of these methods that I'll try to exemplify have given us evidence that, yes, there are changes in language during this prodromal period. And it's given us evidence of what that nature of that change is. So the first method, and I understand that we can't project. I wanted to give you some audio samples of the individuals, but I guess in this room we can't do it, so I'll just try to describe them, in the transcripts I think will help. So the first task is an elicited imitation task. We just simply give an individual a sentence to imitate, to repeat after us. We design the sentences. So we work with linguistic analysis, so we know the computation that's underlying the different sentences. So for example, a sentence like, the physician formulated the therapy which cured the patient. It's a complex sentence, but given to a healthy young or a healthy aging individual, these are no problem to repeat. Interesting pattern came when we began interviewing the individuals in the MCI group. Now here, some of these sentences, the first set that you see on this slide, are imitated perfectly well. Those sentences, the person has to recreate the sentence in order to imitate it. And the MCI individuals are looking identical to healthy aging. The second set of sentences that you see on here, though, are a challenge. The MCI individuals were unable to actually imitate the sentence. A strange result, since they are so good at the one set and they look so similar, right? But a first kind of discovery of changes that are happening in MCI language. Our second task is also a very simple task. We're also getting evidence for changes in language from that task. And this gives interesting types of results, also different types of results. This task, we give a person 3 words. You're going to hear examples of paper, pen, and ink. And the individual is asked to come up with a sentence, tell a story in a sentence using those words. So what your mind has to do is take the meanings of those sentences, combine them, come up with some meaning, and create a sentence. So you have to use your cognitive system and your meaning system, even though this looks really simple. So for example, for a healthy young person, an individual from our group, if you give them paper, pen, and ink, you might get, it's amazing what you can accomplish with paper, pen, and ink.
Paper, pen, ink.
Does this work?
While I was writing my paper, the pen ran out of ink.
Okay, sorry about that.
So, paper, pen, ink.
I filled a pen with ink and then tested it with some paper.
Paper.
Healthy aging, similar kinds of responses.
Paper, pen, ink.
Paper, pen, and ink are necessary for writing a novel.
So you can see what each individual does in their own way. Create a sentence here, create a meaning. Their meaning.
Paper, pen.
And what I want us to see is we had these surprising results when we used this task with individuals from our MCI group. And I'll just give you these examples.
Paper, pen, ink.
I took out my old pen that needed to be used real ink, and which most kids don't know about, and to write a piece of poetry on my ivory paper.
And here's another.
Paper, pen, ink.
I took a pen out of my desk and decided that instead my pen ran out of ink, and so I had to put some more ink in it, and then I wrote a lovely story on yellow paper.
All right, here's the first one.
This is
Paper,
three individuals from that group.
Pen, ink.
I had always wanted to write a story, but I wasn't quite sure if I could do it. But I thought if I brought the ink and paper, what was the third one? I can't remember the third one. I'm supposed to remember them, aren't I?
We're supposed to use all three in a sentence in a story.
Ink, pen. But the pen broke in my hand.
All right, so both tasks are revealing differences, somewhat mysterious differences in the language of MCI. So what are the findings telling us? Well, first of all, in answer to our leading question, yes, there are changes in language in that prodromal MCI period. Second of all, they're showing that those changes are patterned. And when you analyze those patterns, it looks like we're beginning to understand what the source of the deficit is. So for example, we cannot say that the individuals in MCI have a broken down syntax. They are unable to create complex sentences. They are. They've shown us that. They cannot, we cannot conclude that the MCI individuals cannot compose an interesting semantic meaning with representation. Some of those responses in the bricolage task are quite interesting and even poetic. So what could explain the differences that we're finding, the deficit in the imitation and the clear differences in the MCI responses? And what we think is that it has to lie when you think about the model of the mind, the language faculty by which that complex system can be created to create all the sentences we do create. But you have the rest of your mind, which is thought, which is infinite, right? Somewhere in their mind, there has to be an integration. There has to be an interface between thought and language. And it's exactly the point about integration, which we think we are discovering weakening in the prodromal AD period, specifically in MCI. So what else do those results tell us? They tell us also, or they suggest to us, that we may have in our basic research the foundation for constructing a cognitive screen, which could be helpful to provide diagnostics in the prodromal AD period, diagnostics based on language. We understand which type of sentence is likely to cause a problem in MCI and which type of language is not. And on that basis, we have started developing as a first prototype a set of sentences which we can give for imitation, and pattern those sentences around what we know about which sentences should and should not cause a problem. And we have a kind of linguistic signature, you could say, for MCI as it is viewed in language. And now we've been able to collaborate with our computer science collaborator to exploit what artificial intelligence can give us so that we can apply a diagnostic such as this. We call our first prototype COMA, Cornell, Mass General, MIT Communication Assessment. And we are developing a diagnostic tool where automatically on computer phone or tablet, you could administer the sentences, transcribe people's utterances, analyze them according to algorithms that we provide, and develop a report that we can provide to medical systems. Why do we think this is important? Well, as you know, if we're worried about our cognitive health or the cognitive health of a loved one, primary care physicians are where we'll go. But primary care physicians, as you know, have very little time. Clinics like 15 minutes per patient often, and they're not given many tools for cognitive health diagnosis. Be sent to a neurologist, but neurologists are few and far between, difficult to reach, wait times of many months. And the cognitive tests that exist do not look at language to the level we have. They do not look at language in terms of the system for creation of sentences, which is what we've done. So just say our research in a way has come full circle. And lastly, I guess, what we all know is that any major result in this field is going to have to deal with relating brain health to the behavior that we're finding, right? It's going to have to be brain behavior relations that we understand. And so we think now that we understand that language is involved and that we have better, and that we understand its nature, we have better questions to ask as we investigate some of the brain scans of some of the individuals in our studies. And so I just want to thank our theme, cognitive science program, which has supported interdisciplinary research for all my years at Cornell, and the Cornell Podell Endowment Fund. The endowment fund gave us a small grant at the very beginning of this project, almost 10 years ago now. And now with the current grant, it's allowing us to convert from that basic research to a possible diagnostic tool that would have maybe more immediate societal value. So we are much appreciative. And I guess that's it.
Thanks. And so our final presenter this morning is Judy Appleton. And she's an example of a grantee from peers who did not continue her previous work, which the other three have been, but has been doing something different in retirement. She came to Cornell in 1982 as a postdoc and was appointed to the faculty in 1987. She's had a dual affiliation between the Department of Microbiology and Immunology, and the James Baker Institute for Animal Health in the College of Veterinary Medicine. Her title at the time she retired was A.H. Caspery Professor of Immunology. Her project was, as I said, quite different from what she had done before. And it developed because she was an immunologist who served as vice provost prior to retirement. And in the latter role as vice provost, her assignments included support for the Cornell Prison Education Project. And this is how she came to know the program. So following her retirement, she has taught courses in immunology at 2 different correctional facilities, and she has been active on the advisory board of the Cornell Prison Education Project. And her formal title is Sharing and Archiving Voices of Cornell's Prison Education Program. And she'll be joined in the Q&A with Maddie Reynolds from the library, who's also been involved in the project. I want to encourage everyone to make sure they stay for the Q&A after this final presentation. Thank you.
So we have an arrow. One more arrow. Great. Hi, everybody. I just want to start out by acknowledging the support of the Podell Endowment for this project. It made it possible for us to do the work that I'm going to describe to you. And I also want to acknowledge Maddie Reynolds, who is the co-investigator on the grant. She is the Outreach and Information Librarian for CPEP, and she's appointed in Olin Library. Maddie is the person who brings information into the prison for our students. And this was a team effort. And Maddie and I worked together with Mary Katzenstein, Jan Zesserson, Betsy Violette, who was appointed in CPEP at that time. And we call Cornell's Prison Education Program CPEP, which I'm going to do ad nauseum. So that's the explanation there. And the videographer was Peter Carroll, who I think is here. Peter's here, who brings a unique set of qualifications, being a professional videographer who also has experience working in correctional facilities. So this was quite a team that was put together, and everybody came with their own set of qualifications and interests. So just for those of you who aren't familiar with CPEP, CPEP provides higher education in New York State prisons. And in that context, it helps CPEP students, these are the incarcerated students, build meaningful lives inside prison and prepares them for successful reentry into civic life. It informs also thought and action on social justice issues among past and present CPEP student volunteers, students, and the wider public. And this education of the wider public is quite important because the wider public generally doesn't understand very much about corrections. This is the 25th anniversary of the initiation of Cornell's Prison Education Program, and it started when Pell Grants went out of state prisons in New York and the educational institutions left as well. And Pete Weatherby took some graduate students to Auburn Correctional Facility to teach philosophy. And ever since then, the program has grown and diversified. This is an example of a classroom at Cayuga Correctional Facility. This is a group of students. I just want you to notice that they're all in prison greens. This is the required attire for incarcerated individuals in New York prisons. They are with Professor Joe Margulies, who is engaging them in a lively discussion. I can tell by the student's hand being up in the front. This is a typical classroom in one of the facilities. It looks like somewhere between an elementary school classroom and a high school classroom. No frills, no IT, chalkboards. We go back to chalkboard teaching when we teach in these facilities. CPEP has educated hundreds of students in the last 25 years and currently teaches in 3 correctional facilities, Cayuga, which is a medium security facility, and Auburn and 5 Points, which are both maximum security facilities. And and they've also taught in Elmira. That's not going on right now. the program offers a degree, an associate's degree in collaboration with Cayuga Community College, and also a certificate in the liberal arts offered through Cornell. And I just want to point out, to remind everyone, these three correctional facilities are within driving distance of Cornell. So an hour to an hour and a half from Cornell, you have, plus Elmira makes four state correctional facilities, which should give all of us pause. So the goal of our PAIRS project was to collect oral histories, and it had a twofold purpose. One was to supplement print materials in the CPEP collection of more than 800 items now that is currently in the university archive. And this is a project that Maddie Reynolds and I started a few years ago in collaboration with Evan Earle, the university archivist. What is missing from that archive are the voices of the incarcerated students. For obvious reasons, it's very difficult to get materials out of the prison, and a lot of times when men are paroled, they don't bring things with them. So an oral history was a way to get the voices of the students into the archive. And the other goal was to document things that aren't written down, especially these voices of the incarcerated students. The long-term goal, and I'm going to start with the second one and go to the first one, because each of us came with our own goal to the project, and Mary Katzenstein's special goal was to create polished videos for use in educational contexts, public education, recruitment of Cornell instructors, orientation of new CPEP students, and fundraising. And then, of course, Maddie and I were very interested in sharing the archive materials with those interested in criminal justice and social justice initiatives. So the work is summarized here. We conducted 19 interviews in 3 sessions across 2024 and 2025. We had grants in both of those years from Podell. We worked in 3 different locations, including Mary Katzenstein's living room. And the interviews were 45 minutes to an hour long. The questions and prompts for the interviews were developed by the team with a lot of very lively discussion. And interviewees were consulted about the questions beforehand so they could think about their answers. We had one interviewee who, when we said this to him, we'll put the questions together and we'll give them to you in advance so you can think about what you want to say. He put up his hand and said, "I'll bring the questions." And he did, and it was a great interview. The questioner partner was off camera, and this was at the advice of Peter, who said that the videos themselves would be much more versatile in terms of what could be done with them if we had only one person on camera. So that's how we did it. And these are the interviewees. So we were able to interview 7 formerly incarcerated CPEP students. None of these fellows live in Ithaca. So they all came from Syracuse, Rochester, Buffalo, downstate to be interviewed. And it was for some of them, this was a pretty significant commitment of time and effort, missing work, that sort of thing. We also interviewed 6 Cornell faculty members, including Pete Weatherby, who came back for a reunion, and so we snagged him, and Ken McLean, who's been involved in the prison program for years, and others who've taught for and supported CPEP. We were able to interview 1 undergraduate TA. Undergraduate TAs have been very important in this program. CPEP has given opportunities to undergraduates at Cornell to go into correctional facilities and experience teaching in a correctional facility. It's an extraordinary experience. The donor was the person who said, "I'll bring the questions." He is formerly incarcerated himself. He's a Cornell graduate, and he had a lot to say about incarceration. 3 CPEP staff members were interviewed. One is the executive director of the program right now, that's Rob Scott. Another was Maddie Reynolds, the librarian, who's here today. And the third was a program coordinator. The program coordinators are the people who set up the coursework inside the facility. They spend more time inside the facility really than anybody. They work with the staff of the facility. They figure out the schedules. They work with the students about the classes they're taking. It's very much an inside the facility kind of job, and they have a unique perspective. Somebody like me who taught a couple of times for CPEP would walk into the classroom, the students would have all the materials that they needed, and I would be able to teach and walk out. and the program coordinators are the ones who make that possible. And it's very complicated in a correctional facility. And finally, through the extraordinary talents of Mary Katzenstein, we were able to interview the retired superintendent of Auburn Correctional Facility. And this was really just an extraordinary opportunity to get the voice of someone from corrections into the university archive. So the results I'm just going to describe. The transcripts and recordings have been deposited in the university archive, and they're available there now. The recordings, as we kind of hoped, we certainly hoped, reveal experiences and perspectives that are simply not documented in other types of materials. And I'll just touch on a couple of the themes that emerged from the interviews, things that we don't necessarily see as teachers. There's a positive ripple effect of CPEP in the prison. And we heard this both from the superintendent and also from formerly incarcerated students. People who have nothing to do with CPEP, who are in the facility, benefit from the presence of the program in various different ways. The impact of on families of the incarcerated students was also a very strong theme. I'll just give one sort of specific example. A lot of our students have children, and when they're taking college courses, they can talk about their homework with their kids who are also doing homework. And this is a very different conversation than talking about what happened in the prison yesterday. It builds a relationship with their kids. It's really a valuable part of their experience. And finally, I'll just touch on this one, connection with others through education. A couple of the formerly incarcerated students pointed out that they interacted in class with other incarcerated students who they would never interact with under other circumstances. It brought together people from all over the facility, and these guys would not necessarily choose to be in the same room with some of the others in the class. So, and that turned out to be a very positive thing. So there are other themes here, but I'll just go on now. And here's an example of one of the interviewees. This is the exception to the rule, actually. This is Brian Russ, and he's there with his wife, Jolene. And this gave us an opportunity to have a lot of commentary about family. This is the only time we had two people on camera. And this is from a newsletter that CPEP sends out to the larger community of the program. And it was sent to 1,800 email addresses, and it was opened by 1,100. So 1,100 people saw this description of the Podell project and the oral history project. And then these guys are not in Greens. They have all been paroled, and they're at a reunion that CPEP organizes now for students. And I have to look at the first name because I always lose it. So the fellow on the left, I'm just going to tell you about these guys. The fellow on the left is Rich Paul. He now works with at-risk children in New York City and earned his associate's degree at 5 points. All of these guys were in CPEP at 5 points. The next one is Darnell Epps. Darnell took classes at 5 points and then completed a bachelor's degree at Cornell and a law degree at Yale. And now he has a business he's just started called Thurgood Industries. And it is aiming to facilitate individuals interested in working in the trades to find that kind of work. His brother, Daryl, is next to him. And Daryl completed an associate's degree after he left 5 points. And now he's the deputy director of the Higher Education in Prison program at the State University of New York. And finally, Jesse Johnston is on the far right. He earned a bachelor's degree and a master's degree after leaving 5 points. He's a paralegal now at a law firm in Rochester, and he's a member of our advisory board. So this might be a very select group of our graduates, but we could put together a number of panels like this showing successful outcomes for people who've been involved in the program. And I just want to emphasize the team again: Mary, Jan, Betsy Violette, who was a staff member in CPEP at the time. Jan Zesserson and Mary Katzenstein are here. If you have questions, you can chat with them. Maddie Reynolds is here, Judy, and of course, Peter, who did the videography. Thanks.
Great, thanks. So let's just reorganize up here and have all the presenters come up. And we're going to have a microphone that will be passed around among them. And there will also be a microphone to be passed in the audience. I don't know who's going to do all that. Okay. So if you can come up, those of you who presented this morning, and Maddie Reynolds to join them. And it'll be open for questions. And I think what we're going to do is collect the questions for each person. And then, I mean, this is Melissa's idea. So just collect the questions, right, Melissa? I mean, how are you going to do this? We didn't talk about that.
Okay, so just raise your hand if you have a question. We're going to go person by person. So Mike will start. So if you have any questions for Mike, raise your hand, and then we'll go down the row. Mike, while you are answering questions, we'll ask you to be at the podium. So if you could go to the podium, Mike.
Okay, you want to put people at the podium? Okay. Okay, that's fine. All right, so I will get out of the way.
All right, questions for Mike.
Hi, Mike, and I might point a little bit at Susan with this also. The new dietary guidelines seem to center beef, which we know about from some health concerns and maybe use of leather, but it's also a very environmentally impactful crop. And I'm wondering if you are addressing this publicly at all.
Basically, the consumption of red meat. Yes. The little story behind that oh, absolutely. When we wrote the book, we sent it out to reviewers, and I had written a section on beef, and I said in that section, stop eating red meat. The reviewer said, thanks very much. You just lost 95% of the US population. So what we say about red meat in particular, and you're all aware that it's a major source of greenhouse gases, is treat it as a delicacy, not a staple. And that's what I do. I will have a hamburger now and then.
Next question for Mike. Anybody? Okay.
By the way, there's that hamburger going around and 2 bottles of booze. There's a complete story about the hamburger and stories about both gin and scotch.
Thank you, Mike. Susan, if you're up, if you could come to the podium. Any questions for Susan? See if we have any here online.
While you're looking, I'll answer the question about leather. Is that what you had in mind? Yeah. Yeah, you know, it's a very complex, incredibly complex. But keep in mind that one of the major environmental impacts of our clothing is how we care for it. So laundry, if you wear something once and throw it in the laundry, that is not a good thing to do. It's not good for the clothing. It's not good for the environment. Leather doesn't need to be washed, just needs to be wiped down with a cloth. It's very, very warm. It's a very comfortable fabric to wear. I personally have nothing against wet leather. I can tell a story about what I'm wearing right now. This was a company developed by one of our graduates, whose name is, come on, help me. It's called Wool and Prints. And he now has, they started, Mac Bishop, thank you very much. He now has a section for women called Wool and ampersand. Look it up, it's wonderful. And one of the things that he did was developed with help from Cornell, a fabric, wool fabric using merino wool. It is cool in the summer, warm in the winter. It doesn't require a lot of maintenance. He started off his company by wearing a man's dress shirt made of merino wool for 1 year without washing it. Got a lot of media. But yeah, this is a merino jacket and shirt. Okay. They literally don't need to be washed. They don't smell. They, yeah, just spot click them. So yeah. Is there anything online?
Anything? Okay,
No.
great.
So do you have anything to say about PFAS use in fabrics?
About which?
PFAS, the fluorinated carbon.
Yeah, I have something to say about all fabrics that are made with with petroleum products, and that's to use them very, very lightly. Again, there's a place for them in our world, but you shouldn't have a wardrobe made out of these materials. Use natural materials. They degrade better in the environment. They don't add nasty things to our landfill anyway, although they add to the bulk of the landfill. So yeah, just steer yourself away from those fabrics. They're not necessary in our lives. The merino wool proves that. Doesn't need to be ironed. Great stuff. Okay.
All right. Yeah, one more question.
Can you comment on the IT skills that your students tend to have at this point?
I think the short answer is no. I retired 5 years ago. At that point, well, we at Cornell started very early using computers in pattern making, even before there were programs designed specifically for apparel, and have continued that throughout the years. My replacement does a lot of research with virtual fit, which is a promising area of exploration, but again, is not being used in its best way because it doesn't work with individuals. It works with that stylized figure. But you could body scan a person and then dress them. The problem with it is that fabrics are so complex that you can't really duplicate what is happening in real life on the screen until we can actually track every single yarn in the fabric and what it's doing, which is very far in the future. It's not going to happen. I think the digital world is one where there's been a lot of effort to try and do the magic step into a booth, get yourself scanned, step out and have a garment that's made from your measurements. Again, it's highly, highly complex. I call our students the engineers because they really are working with a substrate, the body, materials, incredible wide range of materials, and designed to make them work together. Unlike an engineer that builds a bridge, our substrate moves, thinks, sweats. So it's a highly complex process to create well-fitting clothes that work well in the world. But progress is being made. The one thing that's happened recently was that all the research has been done with body scans that are then normalized, okay, taking away everything individual that we want and trying to fit clothing on bodies. But now there's more attention being placed on posture. So instead of normalizing the posture, researchers are studying actual postures of people and how that impacts clothing that hangs from the shoulders, that hangs from the hips. So some work being done, but someday when we have more time, I'll talk to you about my idea about where to go more sustainably with clothing. It's not that direction. So.
All right. Next we have Barbara. And we have a couple questions online. So for you, Barbara, in the elicited response test, how do you differentiate an attention deficit versus MCI?
Well, you can see in the results that we're getting, for example, with MCI, sentences that are equalized in length, equalized in frequency of the lexicon, equalized in complexity of semantic concepts, are imitated differently from other sentences, all equal in those ways, but different in a particular kind of computation that we've designed into the sentence. So that makes the elicited imitation a sensitive tool in MCI. Measuring executive attention is another area of cognition. It's very important to everything right? Every import to all cognitive abilities.
Great. And next question, is the cognitive impairment comma test specific to US English, or is it applicable to other forms of English or other languages?
Well, it's very interesting that you ask that, because one of the things we want to do now, we can find the funding for it. We've got the colleagues to do it. We have studied languages across the world, right? We've studied many languages in India, for example. What we want to do is have a cross-linguistic version of our tool so that we could provide it in other languages. We have a group, the India Dementia Alliance, right now that is expressing an interest in our developing a companion tool that would be applicable in like Canada or Hindi or Tamil or whatever. They're also interested in trying our tool, which we've designed in English. This is just the first prototype of a tool out of probably several that are possible. They want to try it with Indian English in India, which actually would be very interesting, because in India, largest population in the world, most people are bilingual or multilingual. But the important part of that question is that if our diagnosis works in English and it also works in these other languages, what does that tell us? That tells us that there's a real discovery there, that there's a real discovery that you could maybe relate to the biological foundations. It crosses all the different specifics across languages. So we think that's a very exciting question, actually.
Great. Any other questions?
I'm a lifelong educator, and I want to compliment each and every one of you guys. I work mostly at the elementary level and the secondary level. My question is for Barbara. I have a cousin whose husband is got Alzheimer's, and he's 65 now. He's had it for about 5 years. My question is, what resources are out there to help people like that? She's very quiet. I haven't even talked to her about it. I've gone through my own struggle with clinical OCD since I was 33. I'm 70. And I know the struggle with brain disorders. What resources are available, or trying to get people to not be ashamed of when they get a disease like this, to talk about it and to try to find resources?
That is a super question. And here I would want our neuroscience collaborators, for example, from Mass General Hospital and other hospital facilities, to really go after that question. That question, in a way, has become important even in the limited role we are playing, which is like possible early diagnosis, right? Because reading the documentation, it seems that the reason why a lot of people, why MCI is mostly undiagnosed is, we probably all know people whom we're concerned about. I mean, everyone forgets their keys, right? So it's not just memory alone, it's very complex. But a lot of some of the PCPs that I've spoken with, for example, and the literature confirms this, they feel they should be very careful about insinuating that there is a condition, a symptom. They're being very careful there. And so I'm sure that's got a lot to do with why there's so much lack of diagnosis. But what I was thinking would be a good idea, and this is just an idea at this point, is that not only do we develop this diagnostic tool that can be given to a PCP to use, or a hospital system, but we link that to some of the work that's going on having to do with remediation. So for example, at Cornell Med, there's a psychologist, Booth, and his collaborator, Chaya, and they are actually working at your question. They're actually trying to use digital tools like virtual reality and stuff to go to people in nursing homes or or to reach people and to develop the answer to your question. Like, can communication, can social resources be built in, and how? So I would refer people to those two at Cornell Med to get started. But I think your question is, of course, critical.
Sure. Mental disease is something my poor wife has had to deal with here for, like I said, more than, our entire marriage. And I believe very strongly in trying people to communicate when they have these difficulties. And the stigma in our society is so strong and so difficult, with even with family, trying to convince parents that you have a difficulty like this, or like my cousin, she's just afraid to share the information, and someone like me wants to try to help her as much as I possibly can because of my experience. So I'm just sharing that with all of you, that mental illness is very, very tough. And, there is help, but not enough help.
Right. There's been so much emphasis on health, physical health, right? But cognitive health is a whole world out there. If you send me your email, I'll send you the name of these researchers. I'm sure they would be glad to hear from you too.
Thank you. Thank you. Now we'll have Judy and Maddie. Any questions for Judy and Maddie?
Thanks very much. Having taught only once in the program that you spoke of, I'm sorry, having taught only once in that program, with thanks to Mary Katzenstein, who intrigued me to do it, I left Auburn Prison wondering if this wonderful program has caught the attention of policymakers, and if policymakers, either at the state or the national level, are paying attention to this program.
Yeah, that's a great question. So we have a pretty close relationship with Anna Kelly's, and she has come to some of our events. So definitely at the state level, there's interest. I know our director, Rob Scott, has also done, and some people from our reentry program have also done some work in terms of like lobbying training. I don't know exactly how much, I haven't been involved personally in it, but I don't know how much they have talked with governments at different scales, but we have some definitely interest at the state level.
Any more questions? Yep.
Would you say something about the selection process for the students in the CPEP program, and what percentage of those students you reach in the total prison population, and how many more do you feel you could reach if you had more resources?
Yes, so we have an entrance exam, which we usually give at each prison every spring for the incoming fall classes. The entrance exam is the program, since it's an associate's degree program, is very much liberal arts based. So it started off really as a writing based exam, but now we have students write essays. We allow them to write either on a humanities topic, a social sciences topic, or a more biological topic. Those are the main kind of larger disciplines that are represented with our classes. Each cohort that we take on is only 20 students. So that is I think a difficulty of CPEP is that it is still very restricted to a small percentage of the population at each prison. That's really because of space requirements. So in the classrooms, they're only allowing 20 students at a time. And that's also to preserve the liberal arts character of the associate's degree program. I think that it would be wonderful if we could expand it to include many more students. I think that's a big issue. Like, we see so many, as Judy pointed out, we have so many graduates who've had amazing outcomes upon release. And I think so many students tell us that the college program does really change their lives within the prison and what they end up going on to do after. So I think that opening that opportunity to more people is really important. It's just right now the sort of space constraints of the classes and the staffing on of our program kind of keeps the program small.
One more question?
How accessible is the collection that you're putting together? Is this something that people can go in and use on site? Is this something that's going to be available remotely? What are the access issues and what are the access issues that you've encountered? I mean, I assume there are some privacy issues involved here that you have to get lots and lots of permissions. So can you address that a little bit?
Yeah, so we had all participants sign permission forms to allow us to put these into the archive, and these were generated by Rare and Manuscript Collections at Cornell. As Judy mentioned, they are in Rare and Manuscript Collections in the university archives, and we have a CPEP archive that's in there. I would say the videos, it's difficult to access them because they're such large video files. So people who are interested can go to the archives, make an appointment with the archivist, and then they have to provide them probably like on a USB or some sort of device. They're too large to be like file shared online, but people can go to the archive and talk with the archivist to access the videos.
Thank you. Can we give another round of applause for everyone? And we just wanted to let you all know that our next lecture is the future of the American University, and the provost, Kavita Bala, will be here next month, as well as the provost committee on the future of the American University. It will also be on Thursday, February 19th from 11 to 12. So Thursday, February 19th, 11 to 12. Thank you all so much.